Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers.
And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 15, Episode 125. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Friday, Steelers Nation. And with the 21st pick of the 2025 NFL Draft, the Pittsburgh Steelers select Derrick Harmon, defensive lineman out of Oregon. Harmon is the pick. Pittsburgh addressing defensive line over quarterback and all other positions. And so, Dave, the months-long wait is over. We now finally know the Pittsburgh Steelers' latest first-round selection.
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning and happy Friday to you and happy Friday to everybody. We got day 2 of the draft here later on this evening. Where would you like to start? Both of us, it's been a while since I think both of us had hit in the first round together at the same time. So there's that. I think you and I have been kind of on lockstep defensive line throughout the throughout this process here, and then closer you got to draft day, kind of narrowing it down even more. But I mean, even at the start, I thought you did a good job in the 5.5 minute about the pick segment video audio that you put up right after late last night. They're saying that, look, when the Senior Bowl list hits and we start getting some of these initial measurements and we're able to start turning our direction to the draft more, we go running for the defensive linemen. How many of those 6'4", 6'5", 6'6" guys that weigh over 300 pounds just to get a look at maybe where to start here in the process? And normally over the last several years, not a great list, especially when it came to top end prospects that kind of fit the what the Steelers look for in defensive linemen. And you fast forward even further to what Art Rooney II said back in January during his year-end press conference, saying we got to get better against the run. We got to be better up front. And usually you can take what he says as an area of need. And I think it was obvious anyway, just looking at how this team played on tape last year, specifically down the stretch against the run. And you look at the depth chart, and we kind of wondered, Larry Ogunjobi probably going to be out of there, and it made a lot of sense. And I think the only thing that gave a lot of people a lot of cause was obviously the quarterback situation. You heard all that stuff about Dart and Shedeur Sanders and all, and oh boy, how infatuated the Steelers were with Sanders. Brought him in for a visit and all, but I was really hoping to see Sanders be on the board at 21 to see the Steelers' reaction. Would they even trade down, or would they make the pick? And would it be Harmon? Would it be Sanders? And obviously, a couple of defensive linemen went off the board before Harmon selection, with Walter Nolan and Kenneth Grant both going in the first round before the Steelers pick. And I kind of wonder what was the Cincinnati Bengals going to do? Were they a team that could potentially take Derrick Harmon there? But once Derrick Harmon did not go to the Bengals, I had a pretty good feeling that Harmon at least would be on the board along with Sanders, and the pick ended up being Harmon. And I believe this was the first player that you wrote a profile on this year.
It was. We wrote 360 scouting reports as the site. I personally wrote 70 of those, and the first player I jumped to was Derrick Harmon, and that wasn't a coincidence or on accident. As you said, you look at those guys who have the profile of a Pittsburgh Steelers defensive end. It's getting harder and harder to find those guys as the NFL game gets smaller and faster, and all about these undersized athletes who can gap shoot and penetrate and get upfield. Harmon fits that old school mold, essentially 6'5", over 300 pounds with 34+ inch arms. And so that profile alone is intriguing when you turn on the tape and you see a guy that is not just a measurable, not just a height, weight, length kind of a guy. It's really good tape overall. It's a well-rounded game. It's productivity breaking out in 2024, transferring from Michigan State to Oregon, having his best season. And as the Steelers said, as Mike Tomlin commented on, room to grow. Guys, 21 years old. And so he just checked all those boxes of pedigree, of character, of size, of athleticism, production, the good tape overall. We always say it's hard to find those Steelers defensive linemen, and they found one in Derrick Harmon.
Yeah, absolutely. Good character guy too. Unfortunately, his mom is, I think, battling cancer. I think he said, Harmon said last night that she's on life support, right? So,
Yes.
sad situation, kind of, and as he put it, bittersweet. And I think he said he was headed to go tell her that his son got drafted. And that really tugs at your heartstrings. He says she's worked just as hard as he has to help get him to this point. So bittersweet, heavy-hearted kind of moment. He does check the hearts and smarts boxes, it seems like. Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan talked about, dealing with him through this process and what a good guy he is. And Harmon talked about, learning from Cameron Hayward and how excited he is about that, and was even talked about in the pre-draft process about one of the guys that he models his game after, and that being Cameron Hayward as well too. So this made a lot of sense on a lot of levels here when it comes to Harmon. So the thing is here is, as you mentioned, he's a young player. It still seems from all that I've watched on him, he's got room to grow. Does he come to the Steelers with warts? Absolutely. I think one of the or a couple of the biggest things is the missed tackle rate. And boy, for as good as he was, he left a lot of plays on the field with the missed tackles, and just got to be able to finish better, and a little bit of stiffness to his game, I guess, overall. But I mean, this is a guy that can get after the passer, can play against the run. And if this guy hits what I think both of us view, and probably the Steelers too, the ceiling and the areas that he can improve on, they should have a fairly solid player here overall. This could potentially be a guy that winds up being the Steelers' best first round draft pick since TJ Watt. And how high of a ceiling is obviously yet to be determined. But look, this is a guy that you go all the way back to 2011. Was the last time the Steelers drafted a defensive lineman in the first round. Back then, in the when Dick LeBeau, these defensive rookies, especially with Cameron Hayward specifically, had guys that were ahead of him. It took a little while for Cameron Hayward to get playing time. That won't be the case with Derrick Harmon. They should be able to get him on the field sooner rather than later. There was the kind of late in the process medical reports, I guess, on Derrick Harmon. He was asked about those last night. He says, "Look, I'm ready to go." And Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan both said, the medicals checked out fine by our guys, so they don't seem to be too concerned about it. I think there's a couple of reports floating around this morning that it might be a labrum. It will be interesting to see if when Derrick Harmon meets the media later today for his introductory press conference, if he's asked specifically about that labrum and if it's going to need surgery or what have you. But yeah, that's where we're at on here. And how would you like to dive deeper into him here?
And sticking on that, Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan addressing the injury reports that came out around Harmon, they said they were comfortable with him medically. He came in for a pre-draft visit, and Tomlin said doctors looked at him and cleared him. Omar Khan saying they would not have drafted Derrick Harmon if there was a serious medical flag on him, although it does add to the latest of players with either explicit or reported injury concerns Pittsburgh has drafted, be it Troy Fautanu, Darnell Washington, Peyton Wilson, Corey Trice, and now Derrick Harmon. But he was really durable in college, no injuries there. So if there is an injury, then, hopefully it's just a blip on the radar. Let's talk about the player himself. Derrick Harmon started his career at Michigan State. He's a Detroit native, stayed home in part to be close to his mother, who's battled health issues, as you said, throughout her life and then transferred to Oregon for 2024 to have that breakout season for the Ducks. In your evaluation of him, what are the Pittsburgh Steelers getting?
They're getting a guy that can play in the A gap, B gap, a guy that can two gap against the run, a guy that can penetrate as a pass rusher. Geez, what else? Guy that uses those long arms well. He needs. I is with those long arms of his, and him being a guy working with Cam Hayward now. Hopefully, he can use kind of add to his repertoire more. I'd like to see him maybe develop that long arm that we see Cam Hayward develop over his career. A guy that just got to do a better job, I think, being more consistent overall with his game and shedding blocks and getting after the passer. But once again, I think one of the biggest red flags that stuck out to him is that missed tackle percentage. You got to finish some of these plays when you either get after the ball carrier or the quarterback and get these guys down on the field. So if he can clean up the missed tackle aspect of his game, I think that's the biggest thing overall when it comes to him.
Yeah, I think on the positive, the frame, the length and bulk. I'm just looking through my scouting report. I mean, that again is the profile of a Pittsburgh Steeler. He's quick off the ball. He's got good burst. He plays with good power overall. The bull rush can be a little bit stronger, I think, with time and strength. And as he matures, it'll be more effective. It just can lose a little bit of steam throughout the rush, but it certainly can be effective. I just see a guy that really can two gap at a high level. And I know in Pittsburgh, there's a mix of one gapping and two gapping. Harmon can certainly do both, but it is hard to find those guys that can truly stack and shed. He does a great job of that. His hand use, I think, is pretty refined for a guy that is experienced, but really is kind of a 1 year breakout kind of a guy. And you really see that on his Oregon tape. There's a big leap he made there from Michigan State to Oregon, gets off blocks. He can collapse the interior of the pocket. He played up and down the line. Pittsburgh calling him really more of a 3-tech, 5-tech. Tomlin saying not really a nose tackle type, but he has played, as you said, Dave, all over that Oregon front, which really felt a little more pro-style defense. I want to dig into that Oregon defense a bit more and how it was constructed, because there were a lot of stunts and twists and odd fronts that made that evaluation cleaner for Harmon. It's kind of like those Wisconsin defenses that, were coached by Jim Leonard years back, and it made that projection easier of, okay, how does this guy fit into our system? Well, we see a pretty similar scheme in college, and so that helps clean the projection of having that guy make the jump to our system and to the NFL level. Well, I don't think he's a super twitched up kind of a guy. He's certainly not a Walter Nolan type or even a Kenneth Grant. I thought he was able to bend through contact well, and that's a really important thing because, of course, you're playing through contact all the time. You're not playing free too often unblocked as a defensive tackle. So I did like that aspect of him. And he was just overall consistent on tape. Now, I do think, as you said, and I had this in my report, there were a lot of missed tackles, sacks that could have been, left down the field. And that's one reason why the production doesn't pop last year in 2024. 45 tackles, 5 sacks, 10.5 tackles for a loss. Good production, but he could have had 7, 8, 9 sacks probably last year if he finishes some of those plays. And so I think for the young defensive lineman in Pittsburgh, Keanu Benton has had that issue too, not finishing some of those plays. And so if those two guys can really do that, then you could really see this defensive line spike in productivity.
I think one of the things now that, the best part of this process is you try to watch so much tape on so many players throughout this pre-draft process, and obviously we get a later start than most because we start finally. We both watch college ball throughout the year, but we can't start really getting into the tape until the Senior Bowl starts and start getting a better grasp. But my favorite time of year is once the picks are in. Then you have a smaller group of guys that you can really start refining the tape study and all in. And one of the things I have marked down here on my list to do is to look at his over the tackle snaps versus individually the A and B gap stuff. And particularly why I say that is if you look just at charting alone in his first 3 seasons at Michigan State, Alex, he played a combined 18 snaps over the tackle And then last year at Oregon, 188 there. So it's going to be interesting. You know, was he trying to get more? Was he trying to get more used to playing over the tackles and then thus battling those over the tackles? How was the production and how was the play that with something he wasn't really asked to do? And then even outside the tackle alignment, he played one snap outside the tackle in his first 3 years at Michigan State and 21 at Oregon last year. Obviously we're not going to see him have to be lined up a lot, but I think more specifically is and he was mainly a B gap player throughout his entire career. I think nearly 1,300 defensive snaps as a B gap player, as opposed to 57 in the A gap and 206 over the tackle there. So I think as we go back through his tape, we want to see how he played, as an A gap player. Just 28 snaps last year of that, 353 into B gap last year, and then the 188 over the tackle. And I know people overall said, PFF grades and all like that. Okay, if you're not a fan of that's fine. But the good thing is now I was able to reach out to PFF, and I've got the breakdown of all of his grades from each of the alignment positions. So we'll have a post coming up about that, and then we'll be able to dive down a little bit deeper than that. So I think one of my main takeaways here is, he was asked to play over the tackle more than he was ever asked to do during his college career. And specifically, I want to see how that looks versus the A and the B gap snaps.
Yeah, I mean, again, it just was a big season for him because he went into 2024 as not really a well-known guy. He was at Michigan State. The production wasn't dramatic. In 3 years there, he had 71 tackles, 6.5 for a loss, and 3.5 sacks, but then really came on strong. It was the transfer kids of Jamari Caldwell from Houston to Oregon and Derrick Harmon from Michigan State to Oregon. And I'm just looking up, and I need to dig into it more, but the defensive coordinator at Oregon is a former NFL coach. He was in Atlanta and Cleveland and Jacksonville and coached Alabama for a long stretch there. And so it looks like just really quality coaching that he got. And maybe that helped turn on the light for him in addition to just growing and maturing. Again, young guy, 21 years old, one of the younger players in this year's draft class. So excited about where he's at, but certainly really excited about where he can be as a future player.
And if people are just going to look at his grades and grades alone, specifically, at his PFF grades for overall defense, 83.9, that would have been a tick better if not for the missed tackle stuff, because he was in the red when it came to his tackling, a 29.3 score overall there. Now wasn't he the leader in FBS as far as pressures of defensive linemen or defensive tackles go? I think he had 55 of those. I think I saw a tidbit of that. So definitely can get after the passer. But when you do look at his missed tackle rate for last year, 26.7%. So that's obviously high, and for his college career, it was 19.1%. So why is he missing these tackles? I think one specifically that I saw was against Boise State, where Ashton Jeanty just ran right through an arm tackle on him. Overall there. So just going to dive deeper into, I think they have him down for 12 missed tackles in 2024. We've got a lot of tape to be able to look at from last year. I think we got 4 games. I think we got the Penn State game, the Purdue game, and then both Ohio State games to look at. So it should be a pretty good swath of tape to be able to dive down, at least from the all 22 perspective for him. But yeah, I think this is a guy that, as you mentioned, has got to get better with the bull rush, and he's got a lot to learn at the NFL level, and there's some refinement of the game that has to happen right out of the chute with him.
But the foundational level, the guts of being a Pittsburgh Steelers and NFL defensive end are all there. I think with Derrick Harmon, that's what has me really excited about him. Just some other odds and ends, just kind of reading off the bio. We try to look beyond just the stats and the tape itself and get to know the player, the background. 28 career starts for Derrick Harmon, was a 3-star recruit out of Detroit, Michigan. Chose the Spartans over Purdue and Ole Miss and Memphis in part because he wanted to stay local. Once Mel Tucker became the head coach at Michigan State, is whenever he officially got offered. He played offensive line and defensive line in high school. And then I talked about his weight a little bit too. And he came in really heavy at Michigan State, was 350 pounds when he first got to Michigan State. And he dropped about 45 pounds in 14 months. And he talked about what he gave up, a lot of bad junk food. He said he gave up all kind of crazy ice cream except for vanilla. He kept vanilla, but he cut out all the other stuff to really get that weight down. I know he went back up. At the combine, he came in at 313. At his pro day, according to Dane Brugler's draft guide, he came in at 322. So he did add some weight on. I know guys slimmed down for the combine, so I don't know what his natural and normal playing weight was last season, but I do want to monitor that weight because, we make sure he doesn't get up too heavy there. And then again, talked about, his relationship, his close bond with his mother, a big reason why he stayed local. His mother suffered a stroke at the end of his freshman season at college. And I know there's that story, and I think the Big Ten did a feature piece on him during the season too, that he used some of his NIL money to help support his mother and I think buy a wheelchair accessible van. So those two have a very close bond. And obviously to hear the news of his mother on life support last night was difficult. And he had a photo of the two of them. He posted on Instagram before the draft, before Pittsburgh made him the pick. And so your heart goes out to him. But Pittsburgh Steeler through and through, I think, on the field and off the field.
Part of being a professional, he's going to have to learn to take care of his body and learn how to eat. And the good thing is, man, he's got a great mentor there in Cam Hayward, So I imagine Cam's going to take him under his wing pretty quick there, much in the way he probably did with Keanu Benton, and say, look, this is your body's your moneymaker, and if you want to play in the league as long as I have, you better figure this out sooner rather than later.
In the way that Hayward himself was mentored by Brett Kiesel and Aaron Smith, and so he's been on the other end. He knows how important that is to have that mentorship. So obviously, no concern, Hayward's going to be a great mentor. I'm sure. It is really poetic, Dave. I've talked about it a bunch that, when Cam Hayward was drafted in 2011, as you said, the last Pittsburgh Steelers first-round defensive lineman to be selected, that was kind of a 2-year out plan where Hayward sat his first 2 years, bided his time to be that changing of the guard from Kiesel and Smith to Hayward, and Hayward now himself at 35, soon to be 36, likely to play 2 more seasons this year and next. And now you draft Derrick Harmon for that 2-year plan. Now Derrick Harmon's going to play a whole lot more his first 2 seasons than Cam Hayward ever did, but you kind of see that parallel between the 2-year plan of Hayward back in 2011, the 2-year plan of Derrick Harmon in 2025. And so this one just made a lot of sense.
Yeah, it did, especially after the selection when, essentially they said there was an urgency there to address the defensive line. And I think you and I have been kind of in that same boat throughout this process here. So feels like they got their guy. The phone evidently was ringing quite a bit for teams to come up to the Steelers at 21, but as Omar Khan had said draft and all like that, they weren't going to move away from a player that they liked and wanted. And obviously the deals, he says we owe it to ourselves to at least listen to these calls of people moving up. But you already had 2 of the other defensive linemen we kind of had connected to this team, and Kenneth Grant and Walter Nolan off the board. And had they moved away from Derrick Harmon at that spot, I don't know how far they would have had to go down, but probably odds are pretty decent that, or there were at least, you're increasing the odds that you might not get that guy in Harmon had you moved down.
And obviously, Dave, when it came to defensive line, we know Pittsburgh did not make any serious upgrades there in free agency this offseason. They cut Larry Ogunjobi, which was the right move, but then you re-sign Loudermilk, you sign a couple of lower-level outside free agents, Daniel Aquale, who can play the run, but it's a short-term solution. He's really more rotational depth than he is going to be real starter material. And then you also added a Seizi Otomewa, which is a 1-year deal, which is even a lower level than a Quale guy, not with any guarantee to make the 53. So you hadn't made that splash at defensive line, but you knew this draft class was really strong overall. I would say defensive line, arguably the strongest position, maybe that, and running back, maybe edge rusher, as well as the strongest position groups this year, in what was an overall pretty weak draft class. And so you take advantage of that strength and depth and talent in the draft by taking Derrick Harmon, as you said, kind of the last of that top group to be available, with Mason Graham obviously gone, and Kenneth Grant going earlier than I expected to Miami at 13, and then Walter Nolan at 16 to the Cardinals. Now, there was also guys I liked in Tyleik Williams, who won a couple picks later, but you really felt like Harmon was the last of that upper tier group of guys. And so you can certainly see why Pittsburgh did not want to trade down, because there would have been additional risk. You know, maybe had there been multiple of those defensive linemen available, the equation changes. If Harmon was gone, what would have happened there? I think the odds of a trade would have been pretty decent at that point. But you stick and pick and take your guy.
Yeah, I do wonder, and props to you, because you'd been a big supporter of Tyleik Williams throughout this process here, and he ended up going in the first. Where'd he go? Detroit?
Yeah, Detroit, just a handful picks later.
Right. Yeah, it makes you kind of wonder, would they, had Harmon been off the board there, did the Steelers take Williams there, or trade down and go a different direction, or what? So we'll never get the answer to that question, but we did get the answer to the question of Shedeur Sanders versus whatever was remaining on the board, right?
We did. In night one, Shedeur Sanders did not get drafted. He will wait till Friday to know where his NFL team and home will be. And so in the debate of defensive line versus quarterback, Pittsburgh goes defensive line. And there's a pretty mixed reaction to that, I think, online, both from the national media and the pundits and even the fan base, about who's going to play quarterback for this team. Still very much an open question. But to me, if he's not the guy, he's not the guy. And if Shedeur Sanders was not the guy in the first round to stake your franchise on, then he's not the pick. And you go elsewhere and you go take another big need at defensive line. No one's saying the defensive line in a vacuum is more important than quarterback. Nothing's more important than quarterback. But I think Pittsburgh realized in 2022, this was not an Omar Khan thing, but the organization realized, Mike Tomlin, I'm sure, realized you kind of forced the pick there. Had a pick, had a need. You take the quarterback, even though the value probably wasn't there, and they don't want to repeat that. So, we'll see what happens. We'll see where Sanders goes. We'll see. I have no idea what's going to happen there, where he'll fall. But I think Pittsburgh made the right pick. To me, Sanders was not a first-round guy. I had a first-round grade on Harmon, and so you take Harmon.
Yeah, absolutely there. You know me, I talked about Mike Tomlin never having seen Sanders throw. Look, they probably had, you have a reason that you bring the guy in, obviously, but I never bought heavily into all that smoke concerning Shedeur Sanders.
I didn't know what to make of it. I won't pretend like there wasn't certainly a question or a thought that he could have been the pick. Certainly considered it, but at the end of the day, you go with what do you think the foundation of this team was going to be, which was improving their defensive line, shoring up the trenches there. And so where does Sanders go from here? I think Tom Pelissero said even third round at Pittsburgh is the floor, but we got the only two quarterbacks taken in round one, and Cam Ward, of course, at number one, and then the Giants trading up for Jackson Dart at, I think, 25. So Jalen Milroe, Tyler Shuck, and Shedeur Sanders still on the board, and we'll see their fates tonight.
Absolutely.
Got the Browns with that 33rd overall pick. Could be looking quarterback there. I would think there's a good chance of that. The Saints at 40, I think, will be looking at quarterback, and we'll see what else occurs. So
yeah, we'll get a couple of answers maybe early in the second round here.
Any other thoughts here on the Derrick Harmon selection? Of course, we're going to talk about it a lot. As you said, he'll have his press conference at some point today, maybe later this day, with making that trip all the way over from Oregon. From the Blues Clues perspective, second straight year, Pittsburgh did not go to the pro day of the first round pick, but of course, Harmon came in for a pre-draft visit. And so that actually makes, in all three of Omar Khan's drafts, 2023, 2024, and 2025, the Steelers' first-round pick came in for a visit, which is a departure of the Kevin Colbert era, when that was actually pretty uncommon to occur. Now, Pittsburgh in 2023 went to Georgia's pro day with Broderick Jones, but they did not go to Troy Fautanu's last year and did not go to Derrick Harmon's this year. So to kind of update our Blues clues, it really looks like maybe that visit is going to be the real key point for the next Pittsburgh Steelers first round pick in, say, 2026.
Yeah, I guess, and they obviously seem to hit, the major pro days, the Georgias, the Alabamas, Michigan was kind of interrupted there by the Aaron Rodgers visit. So if it's one of those things that if the paths cross, with the major pro day, along with being a first round prospect that fits the Blues clues aspect that way. I think that's something to look for moving forward. The last two in particular here we've had with Tano and Derrick Harmon being across the country and all like that. Probably played a little bit part into it, as did the fact that how many prospects they want to go see and want to stay at the major schools where they can see the most prospects there. But yeah, that's a good point when it comes to at least the Blues Clues aspects of they brought both those guys in for visits.
Yeah, now those are the West Coast guys, and so we know Pittsburgh and their record are not going out west too often. But either way, that does seem to be the trend, and maybe a bit of a change. And what is the value of bringing a guy in for a visit as opposed to going to him at the pro day? Well, you get the whole coaching staff, the whole organization can have a probably better touch point than a pro day where whoever you send is all who gets to meet him. Maybe you don't send the positional coach for a pro day. Maybe the team trainer, the doctors don't get to interact with him and support staff, all that kind of stuff. So, there is value certainly to bring that guy to your facility. You get more dedicated one-on-one time, get him in the film room on the whiteboard if you want to. Anything medically you can better examine, of course, at the facility. And so there's certainly value in doing that as opposed to making the trip to the college. So Harmon, though, checked the boxes. It took a while. Late visit, obviously. I was kind of on edge for a while. Is Harmon going to be coming in? It would have felt crazy had he not, and of course he did, and now he's the pick.
We celebrated him finally.
We did.
Hitting the pre-draft visitor list there. This just coming in from Mike Pursuta of DVE and Steelers.com this morning. Just came across Twitter. According to league source, Derrick Harmon's combine MRI revealed a partial rotator cuff tear and a labral tear. Per source, multiple teams attach risk designation to Harmon's medical evaluation. Expectation was he might slide a few spots as a result, but wouldn't drop out of the first round.
All right, so that's good information. We knew it was a shoulder. Mike Garofalo had said the other day before the draft there was that shoulder concern with Harmon. Does this mean surgery? Does this mean he can just rest and recover? I'm not sure. It does explain why he didn't do much throughout the pre-draft process, didn't bench, only did the 40. He did do the on-field drills at the combine. So interesting there, certainly on Derrick Harmon, a little more color from Pursuta.
Yeah, and we will once again see during this pre-draft press conference. I would imagine now that this info's out there, they're going to ask him some follow-up questions. I don't think there was much of a follow-up question last night during his conference call with the media and all, but that obviously right now that he's the pick, and these will be some of the questions I would imagine that he and Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin are asked about it. But I think the only thing you're going to get out of Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan is, our doctors looked at him. We're fine with his medicals, and it will be interesting to see, is this something that he's going to have to has gotten fixed, or will need to get fixed, or what have you. But it sounds like if this showed up at MRI at the combine, odds are probably good that maybe this hasn't been fixed. Is this just a rest and recover thing? Is this going to be a lingering thing? But it doesn't sound like teams had him scratched out of the first round, totally. It just a risk involved there. So it will be interesting to learn a little bit more about that. As things go on. And as Ross says, that explains him taking forever to get to the podium at the combine.
Oh, good point. Good point. Yeah, those guys do the medicals before they do the interviews, and the guys that kind of come out last or take longer than expected are probably getting extra examinations. So that makes a lot of sense there. But the good news is this is not this was not a late thing. This is not a late injury that happened in the process where you're trying to scramble and gather information. If this was at the combine, then you have the checks. Then he came in for a visit, so Pittsburgh said that they did more examination of him then. And if there was that medical flag, I imagine he went back for combine medical rechecks. That would have been, I don't know, I think late March, early April. And so if that did occur, then you have three different times you're evaluating him: combine the first time, combine recheck, and then whenever he comes into your building. So you imagine Pittsburgh will be comfortable with him. And although the injury, that sounds scary, it would be a short-term thing. At least it's not a long, because when you hear the medical flag on a guy that doesn't have a known injury, I think, okay, is there a knee issue where they think his knees are bad long-term, arthritic knees, that kind of stuff? Or is there a shoulder that might be, withering away? But if it's just kind of a current present injury, get it fixed, you get healthy, and then you're good to go. And Harmon never missed time in college. I can't find any injury information on him throughout his time at Michigan State or Oregon. So hopefully just a blip on the radar for him.
All right. We'll learn about more. I guess we'll have Dr. Mel every year does a kind of a health update or past injury or post on all these prospects. So maybe we'll learn a little bit from her as this goes on. And once again, maybe Harmon will be asked about this later today.
All right, Dave, as things stand today, and there was a report about Pittsburgh potentially trading up for a quarterback for Friday for rounds 2 and 3, but let's just assume right now what they have is what they draft with, number 83 overall in the 3rd round. Who are some prospects you could be looking at for Pittsburgh to take with their next selection?
I guess it all depends on are they going to get back? They're going to get another pick here within the top 100 overall. It's kind of one of the things that I've been kind of wondering will ultimately happen here when it comes to the Steelers. And right now, obviously, their next pick is scheduled for 83. If they stand pat at 83 and don't pick up anything else here, I could definitely see quarterback being an option here. I could definitely see running back being an option here. How many running backs are off the board at this point? Just 2, correct?
Just 2. I was wrong. I thought Henderson would go round 1. He did not. So it was just Genty and Hampton.
Yeah, but you have to think a couple of those guys, as much raving there's been about this running back class, you're going to have to think that there's going to be at least a couple of more maybe come off the board here. Denver has not got their running back right yet.
They did not. They surprised. They went Jahdae Barrett at 20 when the thought was they would go running back.
All right.
The Browns with a couple of second-round picks.
The Browns have a couple of picks now, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Oh, trying to roll back through my head who are the couple. Were you surprised the Chargers went running back in the 1st round with Marion Hampton? Bet Najee Harris wasn't a big fan of that pick.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. A little surprised. So I think with the Michigan guys off the board and Grant and Loveland, they may have had to change strategy there. So yeah, interesting selection.
And I have kind of wondered throughout this thing how many running backs will actually be off the board come pick 83 there. Personally, if the Steelers somehow get a pick back in the 2nd round or ahead of their current 3rd round selection, I really think that they like both those Ohio State kids in Judkins and Henderson. You get beyond that, you start getting into the the couple of running backs that I think that we have listed there in Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee and RJ Harvey, but there's a lot of running backs still on the board here for the Steelers to choose from with only 2 off the board. You got Tootin out there, you got Caleb Johnson still out there, Dylan Sampson, as we mentioned, Henderson and Judkins. The guy that I mentioned there in RJ Harvey. So there, I think that's a direction you could go. Will quarterback be in play with a potential 2nd or 3rd round pick? I think I have Will Howard as a potential. Where did I have Will Howard? Round 4, I think.
Round 3 in your mock.
Round 3 or round 4. So hey, is defensive line even out of the question moving forward here in day 2? They brought in who was the other Oregon kid up front?
Jamari Caldwell.
Yeah, Caldwell, I think, could potentially be in play. Wide receiver, obviously, I think could be potentially in play here, depending on what's left on the board in round 3. I don't think personally, I'm not expecting an edge. I think, depending on who's on the board at cornerback, I think that could potentially be in play here. Could a safety be in play, Alex?
It's possible. Only one went in the first round. Malachi Starks to Baltimore. I thought Nicky Manwari would have a chance, and he did not. And so the other guys are still there. Xavier Watts from Notre Dame, who Pittsburgh showed interest in. Andrew Makuba from Texas. Not going to discount that, but I do look at running back. The first position the group that comes to mind at 83 is, will they take a running back in? It's a deep class. They've done so much homework on the position. They brought in 9 for visits. You mentioned the names that make the most amount of sense. Dylan Sampson from Tennessee, Bashal Tootin, Virginia Tech, RJ Harvey, UCF. We'll see where Caleb Johnson slots in. I think the expectation was before the draft he would be gone by 83, but who knows? Same with Quinshon Judkins from Ohio State. He was not in for a visit, but they attended that Ohio State Pro Day. Mike Tomlin, Arthur Smith did earlier this year. So I think they're going to want speed, big play back that does point me in the direction of somebody more like a Sampson or a Tootin or a Harvey. But we'll just have to see if running back in general is the pick. There's a good chance that will be the guy at 83.
They only have, there's only, 4 corners off the board at this point, with Travis Hunter being one of those. The other 3, Will Johnson, Jahdae Barron, and Maxwell Hairston, going to the Bills. You have to think there's going to be at least a run on cornerbacks here in this second round. Could a guy like Benjamin Morrison, who they did some work on real late here in the pre-draft process, or a guy that the mega box checker of yours, Darian Porter, could one of those 2 guys end up sliding to 83?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Probably should have been on my list, at least I think Morrison, but Porter, the avatar corner. Morrison has some of the best tape out there, was really, really productive in college, but has the medical concerns with multiple hip injuries, a shoulder injury. But obviously, Pittsburgh has shown more comfort with some medical checkered guys with Harmon and the names we mentioned earlier in previous drafts. So that could be a really good value pick in the 3rd round, or if the guy doesn't work out, it won't kill you the way that a first round miss would hurt you. So those are all good to mention. Quarterback, Will Howard, Kyle McCorder on my list. And then I'll even throw in the curveball of Charles Grant, the offensive tackle from William and Mary, that is a really good athlete. It's a great fit in Pittsburgh's zone scheme. Offensive line would probably seem unlikely to occur, but if the value's there, the value's there. So I just wanted to mention his name as well.
Yeah, if there was one guy they were going to take on potentially on day 2 here, because of some of the Blues Clues stuff, it would probably be Charles Grant out of William and Mary, right?
Yeah, and then at receiver, the names I had mentioned, Jalen Knoll from Iowa State. We'll see who goes first of the Cyclone receivers, Jaden Higgins or Knoll, and then Savion Williams from TCU, who brings those Debo Samuel, Cordero Patterson vibes. That could be an option at 83.
If I had to narrow you down to 2 positions here that potentially go, let's say they don't do anything and pick up any picks here and they stay put at 83, you'd put your money on running back or quarterback, right?
Yep, running back, quarterback are my top 2 thoughts.
Was it easier to build a day 2 list this time around?
It's a shorter list with only that pick at 83 right now. So, and it was offensive heavy, and a lot of the pre-draft visitors obviously were included on that list. So yeah, it felt a little bit easier than the past.
All right. What else do we have to talk about here? We named some day 2 targets here. I guess the biggest, the most interesting thing here is are we only going to have one pick to talk about here in day 2?
If they get another pick, I mean, they could of course get it in a variety of ways to trade up future assets, but I guess you would watch for a George Pickens situation. If there was a time to have him be traded, day 2 felt like it would be the likely occurrence, and we'll just have to wait and see on that. I still think it's less than likely to occur. I still would only do it if you got a crazy good offer, but we'll keep an eye on that as well.
I mean, in all reality, what's the only way at this point right now that you're going to either get a 2nd round pick or another 3rd round pick prior to your 83?
Yeah, there's really no other strong way to go about that unless you're going to give up big time future assets.
Right. So, that, I mean, I suppose some 2026 picks could come and play, but you don't really see, teams are looking for the now, right?
I mean, it depends. It just depends on offers. I mean, you saw the Falcons give up future picks last night to go back up, right? The Giants did, the Jaguars did. So, I mean, you keep the phones open, you listen, you go from there.
All right.
All right,
Okay.
Dave. What else from just globally NFL round one stuck out to you? I think the big trade at number 2, Jacksonville coming up, the Browns trading out. That was listen. Mason Graham's a good player. I'm not denying that, but for Pittsburgh to not have to see Travis Hunter or Ashton Genty twice a year, like I thought could be the case at Cleveland at 2 and then 5 is a win in my book.
What do you think about Cleveland going away from Travis Hunter there?
I was surprised.
They got a haul.
They did, including a future first and a second, but in a class that was short on the elite special talent, Hunter was one of those guys, and the trade out of that, I think, is a tough sell.
All right. I know a couple of Browns fans weren't happy about that, but yeah, at least the Steelers won't have to face Travis Hunter.
For sure.
Baltimore they played the Jaguars this year, don't they?
I forget right now, but either way, we'll have to face him twice a year,
right.
Which is the key. And in most years, probably won't see him at all. Malachi Starks to Baltimore at 27, and then mentioned earlier Walter Nolan, defensive lineman from Ole Miss, at 17 to Cincinnati. Your thoughts on the other happenings around the AFC North?
I'm still trying to look at real quick the Steelers. You would think I'd have them memorize their opponents for this year.
I can't recall top of my head.
No, they don't play the Jaguars. They play the Colts in that division because of where they finished within the division. Also, they do not play the Jaguars this year.
Okay, gotcha. So no Travis Hunter at all.
Where'd you leave me off? Rest of the first round there.
The rest of the AFC North in specific for the moment. Your thoughts on the Nolan Malachi Starks pick by the Bengals and the Ravens?
Yeah. Look, Malachi Starks, the Ravens. How do they keep doing it? Right. They got a very good player. Got someone to be in the back in there with Hamilton. They're probably thrilled to get a player like Malachi Starks when they got him at 27th overall. The Browns, as we mentioned, had Mason Graham, fine player. I'm not sure I would have traded away from. They did get a haul there, though, so it'll be interesting to watch that play out there. But they did get a fine player in Mason Graham. Cincinnati, I was real curious, Alex, to see which way they were going to go there. You see some mock drafts. I wonder if they would have went Walter Nolan had Walter Nolan fallen one more pick to him there. I was kind of worried Harmon might come off the board there, but they went Shemar Stewart there out of Texas A&M. So now kind of brings into question what's going to happen with Trey Hendrickson now.
Yeah, I misspoke. I said they took Walter Nolan. I apologize. They took Shemar Stewart. Nolan went one pick after. That is the sins of me going to bed at like 4 a.m. last night and getting on the podcast here this morning. So, yeah, Stewart to the Bengals, Starks to the Ravens. So, yeah, you felt like they were going to take defensive line. You were worried about would they take Derrick Harmon, but they go more pass rusher, edge guy, defensive end. Pittsburgh had Stewart in for a visit as well, but makes a lot of sense there. Now, could they still lock up Hendrickson? They could. You would love to have 2 quality edge rushers for sure. So we'll see. But Stewart was a really polarizing guy. The production wasn't there. 4.5 career sacks, but a lot of debate about, was he really able and given an opportunity schematically to get after the quarterback? He didn't feel like he was able to really unlock himself and be a true rusher at Texas A&M. So it's kind of a traits-based projection. We'll see if it pays off.
What do you think about the Falcons giving up what they did to get back at 26 to get a guy like James Pierce?
I didn't see all the terms they gave up next year's first. Is that basically the bolt of the deal?
I think I'm trying to, let me see if I can pull up what that entire trade was to get back to 26.
Yeah, but they're going all in on pass rush to get Pierce, to get Walker, who fell to them, which I thought was really good value. The Falcons have had a bad pass rush for years. The Judon trade didn't work out, and so they're really going aggressive under defensive-minded head coach Raheem Morris.
Let's see. The Falcons traded 46th overall, the 242nd overall, and a 2026 first round pick in exchange for the 26th and 101st overall.
It's pretty heavy. It's probably too rich for a guy like Pierce who wasn't amazing value and has his own kind of questions. So didn't love that deal from Atlanta. I get the point, but didn't love the terms.
Once again, as I said earlier in the show, I was a bit surprised to see the Chargers in on Omar and Hampton.
Yeah, me too. I don't know what other directions they could have gone there with some other, I think, potential targets. Loveland and Grant off the board there. Let me pull up the whole 2025 NFL results here so I can kind of go through it together. But yeah, the top was kind of chalk at the start with Ward. I mean, the trade was crazy, but then you go Abdul Carter, number 3, Will Campbell, number 4, Mason Graham being a top 5 player. That all kind of tracked with expectations. Just didn't think it would be in Cleveland. What else happened? Tedero McMillan to the Panthers today. I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. Colston Loveland ended up being the first tight end off the board. A few spots ahead of Tyler Warren, who ended up with the Colts there. Gray Zabel, what a player Gray Zabel is. Goes out to Seattle. You got a guy that can play in a pinch, all 5 spots there out of North Dakota State. Emeka Egbuka in the middle of the first round to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I don't think I would have predicted that one.
Me neither, but just a really, really solid pick there. He goes even above Matthew Golden, who went 23 to Green Bay.
That's newsworthy with Green Bay, by the way, because of all the time that they've never spent drafting a wide receiver in the first round, and this team clamoring for them to get a wide receiver in the first round, and obviously the draft in Green Bay. So I think a lot of fans are happy there with Green Bay getting Golden at 23.
I think someone said now Pittsburgh has the longest streak of not drafting a receiver in the first round. Their last one being Santonio Holmes in 2006. Yeah, Packers hadn't done it since, I believe, Javon Walker in maybe 2001 or so. So interesting stat of the weird NFL draft edition there. I love the Maxwell Harrison pick in Buffalo, too. Just a really good player into the first round.
What do you think about the Giants getting their quarterback in Jackson Dart, going back up to get him?
Yeah, that was a lot of the rumors. Mike Mayock nailed it. He called that one last week or so. So, yeah, I wasn't crazy on Dart as a first round guy. The Giants are, so they have their cake and eat it too. I forget what all they had to give up to move up there, but to get Carter at 3 and the Dart at 25, it's a little Houston Texans like where they got pass rusher and quarterback a couple years back. Higher end with Anderson and C.J. Stroud, but the same principle with New York getting pass rusher and quarterback in the first round.
All right, so we now, let's see, the Browns have 2 picks in the top 5 here to begin round 2. Is one of those going to be Shedeur Sanders?
It's a great question. No idea. Could it be Milroe? Could it be Shuck? Running back? Top of the board, it looks pretty good. I mean, who are the best prospects remaining? Will Johnson fell out of the first round. He had those injury concerns. Eman Worry fell out of the first round, so some talent at the top of day 2.
Chicago Bears have 2 picks in the top 10 of the second round. Is one of those going to be a running back?
Could be. I know what Detroit had with Ben Johnson over there with Sonic and Knuckles, Montgomery and Gibbs. Could a Caleb Johnson be the pick? We'll see.
Dallas took a lineman in round 1. It feels like they still need a running back and a wide receiver, so they might stay on the offensive side of football there. How many teams need quarterbacks from this point forward?
Well, the Saints at 40, I think will be very interesting. The Browns obviously will be on that list, so, and then Pittsburgh, obviously, those are still really the quarterback needy teams.
All right, you expecting the Steelers to show up in the second round? The only way they show up in the second round is they trade Pickens, right? Feels like.
Seems like it. Either way, I'm not expecting Pittsburgh to pick in the second round. Could they? It's always possible, but I don't think so.
All right. Anything else looking ahead to the second round here?
No, I mean, I think we'll sit back, watch, and see what Pittsburgh does. Maybe only one pick tonight, but whoever it is or however many picks they make, whatever they do, we'll be talking about it, writing about it, and be back tomorrow.
All right. We apologize if you went to Steelers Depot and got the site down. We've had the traffic's been absolutely crazy. We're trying to work with our providers to get some bugs ironed out here. Hopefully the site is a little bit more stable, a lot more stable this afternoon here. But we'll be covering the Derrick Harmon press conference later today, and obviously later on tonight as round 2 and round 3 get underway here. So in the meantime, you can follow Alex on Twitter at Steelers Depot, or follow me at you see how much sleep I've had here. You follow me on X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version, SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button. You know all the stuff that goes along with that. So until we get together, about 24 hours from now, I guess. As always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.